everybody and welcome back to my channel. For this week's video I thought I would give a bit of an introduction to one of my rescued ponies, Ollie, talking a little bit about his story and how we've been able to use positive reinforcement and my knowledge of equine behaviour for behaviour modification and also building his confidence and trust. So Ollie is my 18-year-old Arab cross Dartmoor pony. He's around 13 hands high and is the grey that you may have seen on my social media accounts. Ollie came to me a few years ago from a friend's rescue centre, as at the time I was looking for a companion for my previous horse. We'd moved to rented land and the horses that were there wouldn't be able to stay out with him long term. Ideally I wanted to offer a horse or pony a home that wouldn't necessarily find one easily otherwise. Ollie had been there for quite a long time and they were searching for a knowledgeable home for him, where he would be cared for in the most ethical way and ideally trained with positive reinforcement, so I went to meet him as I felt we might be the perfect fit. The first time I visited Ollie I could hardly get near him and I spent a lot of time just watching him from afar as he was terrified of new people and generally very nervous of life. After about an hour of us standing and talking, he did eventually approach me and give me a good sniff. He put his nose to my hand and that was literally the only interaction we had before he distanced himself again, but it was more than enough for me to decide that he was the one. I spent a few months bonding with him and getting his trust before I brought him home. He came across as a very timid and scared little pony, but I felt that he would have a huge personality once he bonded with me. I definitely was not wrong, he's such a character these days. The interesting part came a few months later when he suddenly did what a lot of rescue horses, or those who've previously lived very shut down lives, tend to do, and he decided to unpack all of his emotional baggage. Initially we worked mainly on building trust and getting to know each other, and we did start doing some basic positive reinforcement training, such as training him to touch target. Initially he was very scared of the clicking noise and he was even scared of having food being dropped into a bucket. So I had to get a little bit creative on how to reinforce him in a way that didn't scare him, but once he got used to it, he learned to touch a target really well. I realised that he was very food anxious. I had seen glimmers of this, but it suddenly became very obvious, and that is when I realised that his default when he was terrified of something was aggression. I hadn't really seen that up until that moment because I hadn't put him in those situations and was very mindful of his emotions and also his wariness. But once the food anxiety showed itself and we started to deal with things such as vets, farriers, etc., he really started to show a fear-based aggressive side. I had actually been warned about this by the rescue as he had had some incidents in the past where he'd injured people, etc., which was why they were looking for a knowledgeable and very specific home for him. So pretty much everything in Ollie's life was essentially, in his mind, a bit of a threat. He settled down with me, but anything involving anyone else was a lot of him to cope with, and he also really struggled with a lot of basic behaviours, such as having his feet handled. He'd say no to being led now he had a choice, and overall he just started saying no because he knew he had a choice and someone he could trust. This is common in horses who've previously been forced to do things and then are given a choice, and so it was my job to change his emotions, and positive reinforcement has been the absolute perfect way of doing that. The main issue with Ollie has been overcoming his food-related anxieties. From what I gather, he's had a very rough start in life and was most likely weaned too early and also potentially deprived of much social interaction with other horses. I suspect given his behaviour he has gone hungry in the past and know that at a young age he was neglected and abused before ending up at an auction. He is also partially sighted and can't see a whole lot in his right eye, which complicates things even more, so it took a long time for us to overcome his issues with food. I tried all sorts and none of the standard recommendations that you see when clicker training horses and trying to resolve issues around food, such as high rates of reinforcement, low value food, big handfuls, things like that, really worked. He was treated for ulcers to rule that out, and also we set about working really hard on his food manners training. Eventually I managed to get a horse who can work really well with stationary behaviours using chaff, and he is so much better. He still has his moments overall, but his improvement is absolutely huge, and it took around 2.5 years to get there because his trauma was so deep. Movement in training was a whole other minefield, and we again had to spend a lot of time figuring out what was going to work for him as it was just so triggering. Eventually we did crack it though, and he was able to be retrained to lead both at liberty and with a head collar using positive reinforcement. We've also achieved so many other things, such as improving his hoof handling, teaching him tricks, being able to put a fly mask on to help his sight, he puts on his own head collar, and we've even miraculously managed to achieve my own dream of competing him in horse agility, and in 2023 he had some pretty amazing results. He's still got a long way to go. Despite all of the training, he still really struggles to be seen by a vet and he's nervous of having his feet trimmed, body work, all those kind of things. Anything new or with new people he doesn't know particularly well, is quite stressful for him. All of the amazing cooperative care work I've managed to do with him so far, no matter what we try, just all falls apart once it's someone other than me, which is such a shame. He's also prone to spontaneous recovery a little bit due to his trauma and how deep it runs. For example, in winter his food anxiety does reappear a little bit. He also isn't a horse that enjoys bad weather due to his eyesight, and essentially trigger stacking can result in him becoming less trainable again. This is something that we take day by day and just do our best with, and I'm hoping we can improve in the future. He is an exceptionally tricky pony between his sight issues, trauma, all of those things, and everyone who has worked with him, from vets to trimmers, body workers, professional coaches, have all agreed. But I'm hopeful if we keep working on his trauma with positive reinforcement, he will improve more and more. He has already made huge progress, and it's just one of those things with rescues that sometimes they take a lot of patience and small steps, and it's all a bit 1 step forward, 5 backwards until you eventually get to where you'd like them to be further down the line. So I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about Ollie and his story and his progress with me so far, as well as seeing a little bit of the training I've done with him to date. He will regularly be making an appearance on the channel, as he also does on all of my social media, so I will be sure to keep you updated on his journey across my various pages, as well as him being an example of the type of work I do with horses. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week for another video.